And I'm going to ask Arena to kind of figure out, if we should interrupt and address, or wait till the end. I've got about, if all I did was talk, I've got about 25 minutes of material. So we've got plenty of time either during or at the end. And, what's most interesting to me is people that say, Brett, that's a bunch of crap, or we've tried that and that doesn't work, or we have tried that and it does work. And here's a story on how it worked for my team. So I think as much as we can learn from each other, I'm certainly not the font of all knowledge on this stuff. But what my real goal is to generate some thinking and to generate some discussion. And so I talk about this in terms of who will lead us to the new normal, because I think as many of you have heard, somebody's not muted. So if you would mute, that'd be great. Unless you already have a question. Anybody have a question? No? Okay. But anyway, the normal that comes out the other end of this is not going to be the same normal we had before it. I've talked to a lot of different friends who are in different positions right now. And, at least my personal view is if we look back at 9/11, that certainly changed a lot of things. But in terms of direct effect, other than, for the average American, it's more of a pain in the butt to travel than it was before. If you weren't in the military or you didn't have family in the military, or some of those other jobs that were directly affected. I mean, let's face it, the majority of the company or the country, was back doing what they're doing. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think this is going to have a long-term and a widespread impact on how we live our lives, how we run our businesses. And the one thing I do know that's true is that it's going to take the right type of leadership to come out the other side of this. And so I wanted to start with this. If I ask you what words come to mind when we talk about the current situation, how many of you think of words like this? Crisis, catastrophe, disaster, stress, obstacle, end of times. Or how many think of words like this, or hear people talking about words like this? Challenge, motivation, stronger, better, new, catalyst. Or how many people see this? This is opportunity knocking. Oh, and so when opportunity knocks, what's going to happen? Is it going to knock you on your butt like it did that kid? Or are you going to pick up and figure out, how do we take advantage of this opportunity to come out the other side stronger, to come out the other side better, to come out the other side with lessons learned that make us more innovative, that allow us to explore new opportunities? And so what I'm going to offer today is that what we need now more than ever is leaders who see this as an opportunity, leaders who see this as an opportunity to provide vision, leaders who see this as an opportunity to help people see that as gloomy as things might be right now in a lot of ways, that there is more than enough in terms of the future to generate optimism, to generate hope, and to be confident that we'll come out the other side able to deal with something like this, whether it's another pandemic or a similar crisis, even better in the future. And so as I think about leadership, some of you have seen this slide before, where there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and all of the people it's going to replace and all the jobs it's going to replace. When we have crises like this, it's really when it brings leadership to the forefront, when it really highlights that we have to have strong leaders. And robots are not going to lead us through things like this. Robots are not going to innovate. Robots are not going to have empathy. Robots are not going to make the connection. And so now is the time that we really need leaders and people that are willing to lead. I wrote something on LinkedIn, and I really believed it. I've talked to a number of my military friends that are still active duty. And, on one hand, I miss, after 33 years of always being essential personnel, of not being essential personnel. And I look at the opportunity to lead in a time like this in a significant role as a real privilege. And so having the opportunity to lead is a privilege. Many of you have seen me discuss this before, that I think these are the three things that leaders provide that are most important, but I want to put it in a little bit of context for the current situation we're in. This idea of leaders providing vision, leaders providing motivation, and leaders providing resources. At no time is vision more important than this. I read an article the other day that, are you leading through this crisis? Or are you managing the crisis? And the point of that is that Certainly a number of us have to be managing the day-to-day activities. They have to be dealing with the forest fires. They have to deal with the 6-meter target, whatever your favorite analogy is. But it's the leaders that have the vision, the leaders that can see past this, the leaders that can provide a vision of the future that's better than what we're in now, certainly, and hopefully it's better than what we started with. And so vision becomes extremely important at a time like this. And then the motivation. It's to motivate people to determine how to achieve that vision, to give people the ability to experiment, to give people the opportunity to innovate, to put the future in the hands of the people that are best able to solve the problems. Another article I read while doing some research for this talk said that now more than ever is the time to delegate problem solving. Went through a discussion of how the Chinese have dealt with this crisis, very centralized, very top down. And while arguably there are certain things that worked well for them, that now more than ever, all the good ideas are not going to come from the top. And so providing the motivation and providing the incentive and giving people the delegated authority to solve the crisis, solve the problems at the lowest level is what's going to drive that motivation to succeed. And I'll have a slide at the end that talks about a couple of surveys that reinforce that. And then resources, time, people, and money. Frankly, at IronNet, we're pretty lucky with our resources right now. Lucky's not the right word. Frankly, it's good planning. It's a good company. It's a sector that's not as directly impacted as many others. So it's not that we're lucky with the resources. We have managed them well. Our leadership has done a great job in positioning us such that for the most part, we do have the resources to get through this crisis. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we take care of those resources because we don't know what the long-term impact is going to be. We don't know what this is going to do to our customer base. And so as we think about those three resource categories, time, people, and money, it's extremely important that in this time of very constrained resources that we're using the resources we need to solve the current problems. But in a certain sense, we're also husbanding resources. We're making sure that we've got resources so that when things do get back, or I'm going to stop saying get back, so that when we get to the new normal, we've got the resources to take advantage of the opportunities that will exist. And then this idea of leadership power becomes extremely important. And I don't know if I've talked about this in IronNet. I know I've talked one-on-one and with several of you in mentoring sessions about the types of power that leaders have, and all three of these become extremely important. They're always extremely important, but understanding the relationship between these three is even more important in a crisis. And the three types are legitimate, referent, and expert. So legitimate power is where you fall on the organizational chart. And that's usually the first thing that people think of as power. I'm at the top of the chart, so I have a lot of power. But as I think any of you that are not on your first job, and even if you are on your first job, you've seen that legitimate power is not sufficient to make somebody a leader. Okay, legitimate power is one of those things I think is extremely important. And frankly, I think all three of these are required to be a good leader because the biggest thing legitimate power does for you is it doesn't get people to follow you, but it does give you, in most cases, authority and delegation over the resources. And that ability to direct resources is a very important power aspect of leadership. The second aspect is referent. That's basically people are willing to follow you. You imbue confidence, you provide vision, you motivate, you do all of those things that people go, hey, I'm willing to follow that person because I believe in what they're saying. I believe that they are a team player. I believe that they are an overused expression as a servant leader, but that basically conveys is that they're here to play for the team. They're here to do whatever it takes to move the team forward. They're not here to move themselves forward. And then the third aspect is expert power, being an expert in your job. And as a leader, it's about being an expert in your job, whatever that is. It's not necessarily being an expert in my job. I want you to understand my job. I want you to understand the challenges, but I don't need you to do my job. Trust me to do my job. I want you to be an expert in your job. And so how all three of those come together in order for you to have leadership power is important to understand how those three play off. You know, a lot of times you'll hear the argument, well, you don't have to be in an official leadership position to be a leader. And that's absolutely true. You probably need referent power and you need expert power. And you can certainly lead and you can certainly help the team move forward. But at the end of the day, you really have to understand all three of those. And I think that probably the biggest error made that I see is, and you know, people think it's in the military with it's a hierarchical thing and all of that. But frankly, I've seen it as much, if not more, in the private sector, where people believe that because they're in the top block on the org chart, then they are leaders, okay? That's not necessarily the case, and a lot of times it's not the case. Understanding the importance of referent and expert power are equally important to making good leaders. All right, this slide is all about another one of my favorite expressions, which is never discount the possibility that somebody besides you has a good idea. All right, and so as a leader, again, in this time of challenge, is we need to get all of the good ideas that are out there on the table. We need to encourage people to come up with new ways of doing things. We need diversity, particularly of thought and approach. And if you think you're the only one with a good idea as the leader, then it's going to be a long day. If you're sitting at the head of the table and you're going, does anybody have any questions? And there's dead silence, or all you see is people's heads nodding up and down, then you know you've not created the situation such that people believe that not all good ideas are going to come from you. You know, Alan Mulally, there's a good book, biography about him in terms of he's the guy that kind of turned around Ford in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. And one of the first things he did was to sit at the head of the table and said, I know absolutely nothing about running the automobile business, so I'm going to have zero good ideas about how to make us better. But I know something about leading teams and capitalizing on the good ideas that are resident in those teams. So you've really got to make sure that as the leader, that you're drawing those good ideas out of people. And if you've created a situation where you don't hear people suggesting new things or new ideas, you need to take a hard look at what the problem is, because I guarantee on almost any team, and certainly in the IronNet team, there are so many smart people with so many good ideas that if you're asking, does anybody have an idea or are there any questions, and there's nothing but silence, then you've got some work to do with the team to make sure that they understand that you really are looking for good ideas and you're looking for discussion. Which kind of takes me to this concept, and I always call it loyalty. And as I said here, you must earn it before you can expect it. And here's what I mean, is that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to describe it, but basically, if I'm the leader of the team, one of the things I absolutely can't tolerate is subordinate leaders or team leaders below me going out and going, okay, the boss has another stupid idea and we're just going to do it, okay? But at the same time, I can't use my legitimate power, okay, to make them not do that, all right? And so what I found is the best way to earn the loyalty and to expect that loyalty in return is to create a situation where, kind of a follow-on to the previous concept, is that that people know that you're open to ideas, that you are open to other thoughts, that when you go, does everybody agree with this? If somebody says they don't agree with it, that you've created the right environment where people can feel free to have those discussions. And the way I earn your loyalty is that, number one, I've created a situation where you're free to express other ideas, you're free to express counter views, those sorts of things. And you know you can do that in a way that isn't going to have negative ramifications on what you're doing, okay? And then when we decide how we're going to execute, however that is, and even if the end, you know, I decide how we're going to execute, what I owe you is a discussion such that maybe you don't agree with how we're going to do it, but you understand my logic. You know, we're both trying to get to this objective. I think step 1, 2, 3, and 4 gets us there. You think step A, B, C, and D gets us there. As long as you can see my logic that, okay, I see 1, 2, 3, and 4 will get us there. I'd rather do A, B, and C, and D, but I've asked enough questions and I see how we can get there, all right? Then you can go back out to your team, and you don't go back out and go, wow, the boss has another great idea. I'm super excited about it, all that sort of thing, all right? because people understand and they know you well enough to know that that may not be what you actually believe. However, you can easily go out and say, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there, it makes 100% sense to me, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference from going out with the boss has got another stupid idea and I don't know why we're doing this. So if I want you to be loyal in terms of supporting where we're going, how we're doing things, those sorts of things, then I've got to make sure that you understand my logic. And another component of that, back to, again, somebody else has a good idea, is that when I had the opportunity to lead a variety of teams, one of the things I always looked for was if somebody else had an idea for how we're going to do something, and it wasn't the idea I initially laid on the table, if I thought that that would get us to where we needed to go, whenever possible, I would defer to that person. Because if I don't occasionally, if not routinely, accept another idea around the table or another way of getting things done, then people don't believe it when I say, hey, I want your ideas, okay? So I looked for places and I looked for times to be very clear that somebody else suggested a slightly different way of doing this or a different objective, and that we ran with it and we were successful with it. And when you start to do that, people don't expect every time that you're going to defer to what their opinion is, but you've created an environment where they're free to express it. They see that there are times that you do choose that and you do go that way. There are other times we don't. And when we don't go that way, you take the time to explain, here's why I think we're going to do this. Do you, can you at least understand the logic, et cetera? So this loyalty piece has to go both ways in terms of creating an environment where people can offer counter views, making sure that people really do not only believe you when you say it, but actually see you execute the fact that, hey, I've adopted somebody else's way of doing this and we've moved forward with that. But this loyalty piece is super important. There's another aspect of loyalty that maybe some of you see me written about where in terms of delegating authority, right? That you as a subordinate team lead, you have to have the freedom to make decisions and do the best thing that you can for your team. And if I don't necessarily think that was the best decision, unless it's absolutely going to have a strategic negative impact on what we're doing, then I'm gonna be loyal to you. I'm gonna back up that decision. We may talk in private and say, hey, I wish we'd done it this way or that way. But what I need to make sure of is that I don't take away from your ability to lead that team. I don't want people to ever think that I'm always sitting on top, second guessing you, right? I want them to know that you have the delegated authority to operate. So all of those things go into loyalty. And again, it's like legitimate power. Legitimate power doesn't make you a leader. Being the top person on the organizational chart doesn't create loyalty. You've got to earn it before you can expect it. Leadership style. It doesn't matter whether you're Santa Claus or Attila the Hun. Most people are somewhere in between. But what people want is consistency. They want to know that if I'm talking to you today and you're a Santa Claus, that you're going to be a Santa Claus whether things are going well or things are not going well. On the other hand, if you're somewhere more like Attila the Hun, same thing. What people want is they want consistency. Now, some people are most people are going to be more often than not somewhere in between those two. But where people really get in trouble is where they try to change the leadership style to the point where it no longer fits their personality. A couple of times that's been forced on me in the sense of the way that and it's been a couple of instances throughout my career where, and very few, I've been very lucky that I've never had a lot of incompatible relationships with my boss, but there have been instances. There was a time at Kadena when I was in Okinawa, Japan, where my boss was very much a micromanager and really wanted to get into the details of some things that we were doing. And that drove me to ask a lot more detailed questions of my subordinates and drive them crazy with a leadership style that didn't fit me. And so there are times where you get forced into those situations. You want to try to mitigate that as well as you can. But the bottom line is find a style that fits your personality, that works for your team, and then stick with it. And then as you become more senior and more advanced, that style should probably remain the same, because if it worked for you at one level, it will work at other levels. And it really is a style that has to fit your personality. All right. And then this is a great time to be taking notes. One of the things when I used to talk to, we did this in my organizations in the military. This is something for 2 or 3 years, I was doing board presentations, is that I talked about this having the third party observer, that when you had a crisis situation or you had an incident response or you had some other problem you're working through, try to find somebody in the organization, somebody that's going to be at or part of those senior level discussions, but somebody that you've kind of told ahead of time, hey, I want you taking notes on how we handle this situation, so that when we get to the end and we start looking back and trying to, like we should at the end of the situation, we should look back and say, what did we do well? Should be reinforced? Where did we have challenges? And, when you're in the middle of the crisis and you're dealing with it, it's tough to be able to really focus in an objective way on what are those things that we need to do better, what things do we need to reinforce. And so task somebody in the organization to kind of take notes, and then maybe periodically with the team sit down and say, how did we do last week? What things did we handle well? What things did we not handle well? And then from a leadership perspective, especially people that are what I would call emerging leaders, maybe they're not in leadership positions right now, or at least not legitimate leadership positions, this is a great time to watch the leaders that are around you, whether you work directly for them or you do not, but you're exposed to what they do every day. Now's a perfect time to have your little notebook, whether it's electronic or it's like Sheldon's there, and writing down things that, I saw this worked great, this communication technique, the way they delegated authority, whatever the case may be. I'm going to try to emulate that if I'm ever in that situation. Or here's something I never want to do, right? So everybody can serve as an example. Sometimes they serve as a good example. Sometimes they serve as a bad example. But you would be surprised at how much you'll forget if you don't take time to write it down. I've got a list. It's just a Microsoft Word file of things I've kept over the time. It's little one-liners, and I'll go back and read that from time to time and go, oh, I just did that yesterday, and that's something I wrote down that said I never want to do that. So take notes, pay attention, both to what you're doing and what you see from others to prepare you to lead in the future. All right, lessons learned. We got to be careful about lessons learned. A lot of times we confuse, I think in the data science world, it's correlation with causation, right? A happened, then B happened. Were they related or were they not? And there's a lot of lessons learned that are going to be drawn from this entire experience as we get to that new normal on the other side. And the important thing is to make sure that if we're going to significantly change behavior, if we're going to significantly alter our approach to something based on what we did during this situation, that we have to be pretty sure that the data, if you will, backs it up, because we don't want to reinforce things that actually were not positive, and maybe in spite of what we did, we had success. And at the same time, we don't want to assume that because we did A, that B actually occurred. And again, one of the things I was reading in preparation for this was a Harvard Business Review article, and it was about employee motivation and whether you worked remotely or worked in an office. And one of the issues that, is certainly going to be a topic in our company, it's a topic in just about every company that's lucky enough to still have people working right now, is, geez, maybe we can just work remotely forever, right? And maybe that will work just as well. And so this HBR study, as you see down there, about 10,000 US workers, and they took a look at motivation. And I'll describe for you in a minute how they define motivation. But what they found is employees that had no choice on where to work, if they worked remotely, as you can see, they were least motivated. If they worked in an office, they were still pretty minimally motivated. And on the other hand, if they had a choice on where to work, that the motivation went up in both cases, and at least in this study, the remote worker was slightly less motivated than the office worker. So to me, the motivation thing, I'm not sure what conclusions to draw there, but I think there definitely is something to this idea on having a choice on where to work. To me, it's kind of like the open office environment versus the offices type of thing. And the way they looked at motivators is play, purpose, and potential is what they talked about. And in this article, play meant, the holy grail of work, right? Is that it feels like I'm at play. I love what I'm doing. I want to do it every day. I would do it if nobody paid me, right? Purpose is pretty straightforward, is that I understand the purpose. It's important to me. And then potential becomes really important, because potential is the work I'm doing, does it have the potential to really impact the team, really impact the organization and make us better? And what they found is demotivators, and what they really highlighted was all three of these, particularly at this challenge, at this crisis, if you will, that we're working through, that these demotivators can become very much exacerbated, if you will. Emotional stress, that's obvious. Economic stress, that's obvious. And then what they call inertia. And inertia is basically, well, why are you doing that? Well, because I've always done it. Does it really help the company? I don't know. I've always done it. It must. So this issue of inertia becomes a demotivator. And then the other thing they took a look at was this concept of experimentation. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that we're facing challenges that we haven't faced before. The people in the box at the top of the org chart are not going to come up with all the best answers. And so this one was combining that choice on where to work and not work on whether you've got the ability to choose, that you've got the ability to experiment, that you've got the ability to innovate, and your innovation and new ideas are valued by the organization. And you can see that the worst place to be on this scale is if I give you no choice on where to work, I make you work remote, and then I don't offer you any opportunity for choice or experimentation or anything else. And then as you can see on the right side of the chart, again, once you have that choice on where to work and that opportunity to experiment, offer new ideas, those sorts of things, then that starts to raise the satisfaction and raise the level of motivation. And so, some of this is obvious, but it's good to see the data, is that when people are given the opportunity to solve tough problems, when they are clearly heard and respected, and their ideas are at least tried by their leadership, then they are more motivated. Even if that particular initiative doesn't succeed or doesn't work, having the opportunity to experiment and being encouraged to experiment, innovate, becomes really important. But the other thing I brought out of this study, to me, is this thing on, is remote work better or office work better, is not really the answer. It's the choice on where to work. And so I think you will see in IronNet a discussion over the next few weeks to few months on how much remote work do we want to have, and how much do we not want to have. And I know that Bill and General Alexander will be interested in hearing opinions from across the company. And at least from this study, one of the things that comes out is this idea of choice. And so I think that's something we should keep in mind. All right, Pee Wee Herman, kind of to wrap up this whole motivation and discussion, he's all about connecting the dots. He's all about a lot of things, but one of the things he's about is connecting the dots. And as a leader, it goes back to what they talked about with the purpose versus the inertia, with the idea that I have the potential to really impact the company. And many of you probably heard me say this before, but it is about, as a leader, helping connect the dots from the most junior person in the company all the way to the company mission. We try to do this with the OKRs. That's one of the ideas there, is the corporate level objectives, and trying to have those at least be connected as we go down. But not everybody's going to connect the dots in the same way. As Pee Wee Herman did, he went through a little bit of a roundabout process to connect those dots. And that's fine. Everybody will connect the dots in a different way. But clearly, as team leads, as managers, you really need to spend some time in making sure that if you go back to those motivators and demotivators I've talked about, that to me, one of the ways to think about is that connect the dot thing. Can I help everybody on the team? Can I make sure they can connect the dots, that what they're doing every day, what they're doing as a remote worker now, whether they would choose to do that or not, is important to the company, and I can help define that. And just as importantly, if you find people that are struggling with that, then ask them, what do you think you could do to help us move forward faster? And then let them adopt some of those ideas. Let them try them out and see how they work. All right, and I'm going to finish with one of the important things about being a leader is being grateful or being thankful. And I'm grateful because it's a good time to be in the cybersecurity business, right? The Russians are going to keep dorking with our election. They're going to continue to try to hack the power grid. The Chinese are going to continue to try to make F-35s out of stealing intellectual property. The Iranians are going to continue to go after the banks and the oil sector and with destructive attacks and those sorts of things. And then the North Koreans, I love that map on the left that shows the Korean Peninsula at night, and the whole top half is dark. That's North Korea, but they figured out you don't have to be in North Korea to run a hacking operation. You can go to Malaysia or Indonesia or China, and they're still going to be out there trying to steal Bitcoin and compromise the banking system. So we have plenty to do to keep us busy. Our clients and our potential customers all still need cybersecurity, and so we have a great opportunity because they're going to still spend a lot of money. They all know they've got a 100% chance of being hacked. We can help them. Because 53% of enterprises have no idea if their tools are working. And we have a lot of ways to show them that they're working or not. And at the end of the day, we understand better than anybody what this dude in the hoodie is doing every day. And so we've got an opportunity to not only sustain our business during this time, we've got an opportunity to grow our business, and we have an opportunity to ensure our business is postured to take advantage of every opportunity once we get to whatever that new normal is. All right. As I promised, that was just about half of our time with me talking, and I think most of you have found me on LinkedIn, and I'm on Instagram. I've been experimenting with that, so if you're an Instagrammer, then I'm at General E.T. Williams there, and happy to communicate there or Slack or anything else. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if what kind of discussions or ideas or other thoughts that that people have that they want to share with the group.
Hey, Brett, it's Chris Wilkinson down in sunny, beautiful Houston. How are you?
Awesome. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hey, good. Question for you. Politics aside of everything, how do you think we're going to learn lessons when we seem to have a culture of no one taking responsibility for anything? Isn't that critical that you have to take responsibility if you're going to learn?
Yeah, and yeah, politics aside, I'll tell you that was, you know, when you hear that from, you know, from the top, it really makes you think back to the good old days. Wasn't it Harry Truman that had the buck stops here thing on his desk? You know, and it's kind of like whenever we came into, you know, we took command of a new organization, right? I went into the biggest combat wing in the Air Force. There was 25,000 people on that base, and, you know, had 2 days of change out, and then I was the commander. I wasn't the new commander. I was the commander, right? And I had responsibility for everything that happened before and everything that was going to go forward. And I think that having an attitude of, you know, being in a significant leadership role and not accepting responsibility. I mean, because people are smart enough to figure out, you know, what did you have control over and what did you didn't have control over, but they don't want to hear you arguing about whose fault it is. They want to hear you talking about the solution and how you're going to move forward. So, so I'm with you, Chris. I think that is, frankly, that's one of the most disturbing comments I've heard. Again, leaving politics aside, I just don't think that's what I want to hear from senior levels.
Amen.
What was that in reference to? Was that a Trump thing? Sorry, I missed that in the media. Maybe.
No, I don't mean to make it a Trump. Yeah. But I don't mean to make it a Trump thing, because we've seen it on all fronts. We've seen both parties. We've seen Congress blame the president blame the Congress. We've seen people blame China. We've seen China blame us, and the Europeans blame whomever, and the hospital system blame the insurance system. And if nobody's going to take responsibility for anything, I think what this crisis has done is kind of exposed our culture of irresponsibility, and hopefully we'll make some change and people can step up and just say, yeah, it's my fault and I'll fix it.
And it's, I'm not sure. Yeah, irresponsibility, I think, is one word. The one that I was thinking of is, because I was involved in one of these in the Pentagon in 2004, one of these tabletop exercises about pandemics. And there's been a bunch of them done. And there is nothing. You know what irritates me, and you're right, Chris. It's on all sides of the political spectrum. But people go, nobody could have anticipated this,
except ATV.
Yeah, a lot of ATV. Yeah, a lot of people anticipated it. It's just like everything, though. We didn't put the resources into preparing for it. You know, like down here, one of the politicians on TV, I can't believe the schools weren't prepared for full online learning. Really, the schools don't have enough budget to do anything. You know, barely run the school today, and they were going to invest in full online learning in anticipation of a pandemic. Yeah, so I get you. And, you know, Joe, you just, you know, hit the nail on the head. Accountability is, you know, accountability is critical, and you've got to accept both responsibility and accountability. So, yeah. Let's see. Somebody just came online. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Hey, sir. So one thing I've observed is a challenge will happen and it'll have differential effects across organizations. So in the military context, different commands will deal with it differently. Do we see the sectors kind of dealing with this new normal differently? And do we expect how they deal with it to affect kind of the current state of affairs? The current state of affairs, essentially, in my understanding, being, finance is pretty hot in terms of their level of sophistication. Energy is very important. The different kind of considerations. Do we think that this will affect that and therefore affect how we interact with customers, new business, and how we do our business?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people on here. So I'll just give you my quick thought, and then other people that are working with the sectors. I think that the good thing for us is everybody's got to have cyber security, right? Just about no matter what they do. But depending on the economic impact to your business, you might not be able to afford much of anything, which would include cybersecurity. So I think it's going to depend on how well the various sectors come out. But I'd defer to especially the sales and customer success folks that work with these different people. But I think it'd be interesting to hear a couple other thoughts.
Yeah, Brett, this is Gareth from the finance side. I mean, it's actually been positive from our message of collective defense, and as an organization, what we do. We are viewed right now as a nice to have because they are dealing with the transition of their workforce. I mean, just simple things. We have a potential customer in Norfolk who has 2,000 call center folks they had to move at home. So that's 2,000 laptops they had to buy. That was 2,000 endpoint solution licensing they had to buy. That's 2,000 VPN license they had to buy. And it is exposing things, that they look at collective defense could solve: automation, alert generation, and the weakness of their security, disaster recovery type of thing. So we see it as a strong opportunity once we get through, this crisis and we see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gareth. Anybody else?
Yeah.
In a sector like utilities, you see where they historically may have viewed their value in their physical assets. I think they're now coming to a determination that like 85%, 90% of their assets that the market really values are their digital assets. And those assets require a high level of protection. That's something they might not have thought about, especially being in a physical asset intensive industry.
All right. Any other thoughts on Matt's question?
Yeah, Brett, Richard Bird here, oil and gas. We're being affected doubly because of the price wars that are going on globally, the very soft demand as a result of COVID-19, and then the escalating production wars. So it might take a little while for us to recover, but what we've seen is that this industry is quite resilient. To Chris's point, digital assets. The last time we went through one of these lulls, the industry got very operationally efficient and created this whole concept of the digital oil field. So we're expecting good things and a strong recovery, but it will take some time.
Okay, thanks. All right, anybody have any vignettes or things with their teams that are working or not working, or any ideas that we may have sparked today about how you're going to move forward as a team lead or a team member?
Hey, Brett, I got a quick case study.
Great.
If you could put those three types of leadership or authorities up there.
Yeah.
I think it was germane to a here and now situation that we have with IronNet. How do we go forward to deliver our product, or even a POV for that matter, in the new norm. And the new norm, took all of these.
You talking about this show?
Yeah, that's it right there. Whoops, legitimate. There you go. So the senior leadership at the top of IronNet, we said, look, we've got to figure out how we deliver remotely. And they put together a leadership team, a team of leaders. They legitimized it right off the bat by saying, here's the objective. We need to be able to do remote POVs, fully 100% remote. And whatever it takes, if you run into a showstopper, the priority of this company will break that down. We then put together a team that had a referent leader on it. I'll call her out, Gretchen, who gathered a group of expert leadership from around the company, and we basically chartered them to go off and do this. And as a result, they, what we thought was almost impossible, actually doing a delivery. Every blocker they hit, they actually solved it on their own. There was very few things that the company had to weigh in on and provide resources to. The solution was right there. It just took this combination of leadership, this combination of authorities and influence and expertise to get to that. And most of you will see how we're able to now send a sensor from REDAP to a customer, have it drop ship to their IT guy, set of instructions in the box that they pull out and that they move into their data center, plug it in, contact IronNet with another set of documents that walk them through all that, making the connection to a back end, and voila, there it is. So the point being is, one, a lot of the problems that we didn't think were solvable are actually very solvable. And if you do apply these sorts of instruments of power throughout this organization, they'll succeed.
Well, thanks, Joe. I'll tell you, there's two reasons I really love that story and that you shared that is number one, it's a great example of, what can be done. And I 100% agree with all of your points. But number two is that's an example of company culture. I'd done a fair amount of work with Gartner a couple of months ago on, how do you determine what your company culture is? And the guy I was working with, he had run HR for Unilever in India, and then he'd run HR for Amazon Europe. And what he talked about is, you can't sit down and say, our culture values innovation, our culture values this, our culture values that. He says, you have to find stories in your company that are how people do things. And you look at those stories and you tell those stories over and over. And those are the things that define your culture. And so, Joe, that is a perfect example of a success story, right? That we should tell over and over. And we should take, just like you said, the lessons learned on that. People that really do well, they learn the lessons from this specific event, but they learn how to apply those lessons to a broader set of circumstances. And so thanks for sharing that, Joe. That was perfect. Other thoughts, critiques, comments? Okay. All right. What I will do is there were two HBR articles that I referenced in there. I will post. I think I can probably semi-legally update or upload the PDFs. I'll do that in the Slack channel, the All Hands Slack channel, so everybody has access to those. The one you'll see, especially if you're a team lead, it kind of had a day-by-day thing, a Monday through Friday kind of thing of maybe how you want to coordinate activities across your team, focused on getting the things done you need to get done, but at the same time, encouraging experimentation, innovation, new ideas, and having a very specific way to go through that. So I'll post those in the All Hands channel for y'all to take a look at. And beyond that, I just hope that you all are safe and healthy wherever you are. And, keep in mind that, I think for most of us, hopefully we're getting through this pretty well, but, everybody has different issues. I was talking to Gaurav in Singapore today, and, he's doing fine. But his particular stressor is his wife went to India with their 3-year-old son to visit the parents, just as this thing was kicked off. And so she was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks, and so far has been gone for 45 days, and they're not sure when they'll get back. So everybody's safe and everybody's healthy, but, it's that unknown that's out there. And so when we look at those remember those demotivators there. You know, emotional stress is clearly one of those. And so everybody that, you know, we just have to acknowledge that each of us has some kind of an emotional stress here. And I think continuing to just check in and see how each other is doing with some real empathy is extremely important. And I think this company does a terrific job of that. So thank you all very much. Thanks for your attention. And feel free to hit me up one-on-one if there's anything I can help you with. Okay. Anything else, Irina?
No, thank you so much. One quick question from Garrett was, can we share the slide with Lincoln and the robot? I mean, I took a screenshot. I can also post.
Tracy, just share you can put the whole slide deck up in all hands or wherever, or you put it on a Confluence page, I think, usually, don't you?
Yeah, I do post the links, but yeah, I mean, I usually post the link as well on the Slack channel as well. Yep.
Yeah, so you can share the presentation. That's fine. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Brett. I think that was super valuable for everybody. And thank you so many of you who attended. I think it was our biggest, one of the biggest brown bags, over 100 people who signed up. So thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank you all. Hang in there. We'll make it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Brett.